Welcome to Shelor Selects. The whole system will be ready in a few minutes. Take your seat and enjoy.
Let's start off with your background, and that way you can kind of fill me in a little bit more about it. And you might have to talk to me like I'm five, to be honest with you, just so I can get a better understanding of it. So if you want to go ahead and kick us off with that, and we'll get the conversation flowing from there.
Okay, sure. So it's actually my 30th year in business. And as life would morph and change, so would business. And I started in health and then mindset and then personal development and then trauma. I had a really painful betrayal from my family and thought I did what I needed to do to heal. But apparently there was more to do. A couple of years later, it happened again. This time it was my husband. So got him out of the house and looked at the two experiences. And I was like, well, what's similar to these two? I mean, of course I am, but what else? And I realized that, boundaries were always getting crossed and it wasn't really taking my needs seriously. So I knew something drastic had to change. So here I was, 4 kids, 6 dogs, a thriving business. I was 50 and I'm like, we're going back for a PhD. And it was in transpersonal psychology, the psychology of transformation and human potential, because I was changing so much. I didn't quite understand it. He was too on his own, wasn't ready to look at that. I didn't know how I was going to do this program, how I was going to pay for it, but I knew something big had to change. Anyway, it was time to do a study. So I studied betrayal. What holds us back? What helps us heal? And what happens to us physically, mentally, and emotionally when the people closest to us lie, cheat, and deceive. That study led to 3 groundbreaking discoveries, which changed my health, my business, my family, my life.
Wow. So what are those 3 groundbreaking discoveries?
Yeah. So the first I was studying something called, I was studying betrayal and post-traumatic growth. And for those who aren't familiar, post-traumatic growth is, if you can imagine, kind of an upside of trauma, how any trauma, death of a loved one, disease, natural disaster, leaves you with a new insight, awareness, perspective you didn't have. Like maybe you lose someone you love and you realize life is short, like that kind of thing. Okay. But I had been through death of a loved one. I had been through disease. I was in the ICU 11 days, miracle I'm alive. But I was like, betrayal feels different for me. I didn't want to assume. So I asked all my study participants and I said, if you've been through other traumas besides betrayal, does it feel different for you? Unanimously, they said, oh my gosh, it's so different. Here's why. Because it feels so intentional, we take it so personally. So the whole self is shattered and has to be rebuilt. Rejection, abandonment, belonging, confidence, worthiness, trust, they're all shattered. So it didn't quite qualify as post-traumatic growth. It was like post-traumatic growth and rebuilding the self. So I coined a new term, which is now called post-betrayal transformation. That's the complete and total rebuild of your life and yourself after an experience with betrayal. So that was the first discovery. Yeah. This was pretty crazy. So 4 weeks after the birth of my son, so I had a 16-month-old and a newborn. And I remember waking up one morning and I was like, something's really wrong. Like I knew something this wasn't just, I wasn't feeling well, like something felt really off. So my mom was alive at the time. She's since passed. I had her come over because my husband was leaving for work. And I was like, I can't be alone with these 2 babies. And so I remember she came over and it just got worse. I got worse and worse. And I remember at one point, my stomach just started getting so distended. It looked like I was 6 months pregnant and my energy, I had no energy and I couldn't even call for her. Like nothing was coming out. So I remember taking the remote and throwing it at the door just so she would hear me. No. And she opened the door and I passed out. She, thankfully, she heard me throw the remote at the door and rushed me to the hospital. And I had 104. My pressure was 88 over 44. By this point, she called my husband, met us at the hospital, and they thought it was appendicitis because my stomach was just getting so blown up. But so they did an appendectomy, and that's when they saw the infection. And it turned out it was something called peritonitis, which is an entire infection of your peritoneal cavity. So they suctioned out between a pint and a quart of strep pneumonia. So I was quarantined in the ICU for 11 days. I mean, it's a miracle I'm alive.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was intense. And I remember back in those days, there was a nurse who taught me how to use the morphine drip. And it was like, drip, pass out, wake up, pain would be so bad, drip, pass out from the pain, wake up, drip. And that was it. And then, and I remember a few days in, because at the first few days, I didn't even know what was happening. And then later on, I remember a few days in, and the pain was otherworldly. Like I had never experienced anything like this. And I just remember like, I just didn't want to do it anymore. And that was the moment. Like I pictured my husband and these two babies. And the deal was I signed up to be their mom and they signed up to be my kid, my kids. And I was like, And I don't know if I screamed it in my head or out loud, but I remember I was like, God, universe, source, anything, get me out of here. And I know that's the reason why I'm alive. That's what changed that whole moment right there, that determination of just getting me out of there, because the doctors were shocked that I survived that. They said my age and condition saved my life. It's not. It was that decision. I know it.
So was there anything, did you have any symptoms before this, or did this just come on unexpectedly? I mean, man, I can't imagine. I can't imagine what you went through with something like that. I mean, I've never had anything like that.
It was intense, but I'll tell you, even though I've been through and I've lost loved ones and been through peritonitis, and this was crazy, nothing got me like this betrayal. Nothing. That was the hardest, by far, the hardest thing. And what we learned too, and I'm happy to share the other two discoveries. Sure. Healing is always a choice, whether we rebuild ourselves and move on. And that's what I wound up doing with my family. It wasn't an option to heal with them. Or if the situation lends itself, if you're willing, if you want to, you rebuild something entirely, like from the ground up new with the person who hurt you. And that's what I did with my husband. Like not long ago, we actually married each other again. New rings, new vows, new dress, and our 4 kids as our bridal party. And never in a billion years would I have done that if I hadn't done the work that I had done, if I wasn't totally different, for sure, if he wasn't totally different. So I've been on every side of this except being the betrayer.
So that's really admirable that you two actually got back together. I mean, I come from a family of divorced parents, and they resent each other almost at this point.
Well, it's really easy to do that. And I get it. And actually, the third discovery, this is, I wrote the book Trust Again. And that was where, I put the discoveries in there. It's basically like my dissertation, but who wants to read that, So I made it much reader friendly and put it in Trust Again. And one of the biggest discoveries was that, and I'm happy to go through them, that while we stay stuck for years, decades, a lifetime, and so many of us do, if we're going to fully heal, and by fully heal, I mean symptoms of post-betrayal syndrome, and I'll get to that, to the fully healed place of post-betrayal transformation, we're going to go through 5 now proven predictable stages. And what's even more exciting about that is we even know what happens physically, mentally, and emotionally at every one of those stages. And we know what it takes to move from one stage to the next. So healing truly is predictable. When you said that about your parents, what is so typical is most people get to and stay stuck in stage 3. I mean, so much so that this book actually was just released 2 weeks ago, From Hardened to Healed. It is just for people stuck in stage 3, because I found the resentment, the anger, the bitterness, the like life of suck, that's that stage 3. And when I go through the stages, you will see exactly why that's where people land and stay. And good chance both of your parents are still there. It could definitely be from, now here's the thing, even though the stages were discovered because of betrayal, studying betrayal, they really apply to any traumatic experience or even a set of limiting beliefs. Like it could be from something someone said to you when you were a little kid that you made to mean, I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable, I'm not deserving, whatever. And then that belief system has taken you to this stage 3 and has kept you there your entire life? Now, I don't know because I don't know your story, but very likely because it's so common. Most people are in stage 3. And like I said, transformation doesn't even begin until stage 4, which is so intentional. And you mentioned before we got on air, you're going to be watching, you wanted to watch my TEDx's. I did 2 of them. The first was stop sabotaging yourself. The second is, do you have post-betrayal syndrome? But stop sabotaging yourself. That first one, that's really all about how we sabotage ourselves to stay stuck, because it causes way too big of a shakeup when we're not stuck. Because people, Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
It's like we're using food, drugs, alcohol, work, TV, keeping busy, reckless behavior, anything to numb, avoid, and distract ourselves from what's so painful to feel or face. And we do that. But the challenge is, the stakes get bigger. It's like the voice gets louder and louder that something needs to change. But we want to ignore that. So the stakes get bigger and bigger. So if you used to take, 1 glass of wine, it's taking 2 or 3. You used to take 1 show, you're binge watching a whole series. You used to take, 1 small shopping spree, you're spending a lot more. So the stakes get bigger and bigger. And, that theory kind of works until it doesn't.
It reminds me, I think in 2015 or 16, I was reading, I think I read about this, or it was on another podcast, but they did an experiment with mice where they actually put them in different habitats, I guess you could say. And like one of them, they actually filled one of their water bowls with, I think it was heroin, but I'm not 100%. And the other one, it was all normal, just normal water and everything. And they actually made their cages really nice. And they wanted to live there, but the ones who didn't have anything and they hated living in that cage, they actually went to the heroin every time versus the ones that were actually happy with their living conditions. So that's what it sounds like people who were just destroying themselves and just unhappy with the way they are. They're just going to those drugs, like you just mentioned, like even with mice and animals now. So.
Oh yeah. And that's what it is. It's like, we're not comfortable, but we don't know we can do anything about it. So we just, kind of numb ourselves. It's like, I'm going to be totally dating myself here, but when I was a little kid, if someone said something you didn't want to hear, you stuck your fingers in your ear and you're like, la, la, I don't hear you.
Yeah, I remember that.
Okay. All right. Well, food, drugs, alcohol, work, TV, keeping busy. That's the adult version of that same game. But you can't very well, go to your boss and your boss is asking you to do something and you stick your fingers in your ear, I can't hear you. Or your boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife is like, we need to talk about this. And you're like, la, 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 you can't do that. So what do? We use those things to numb, avoid, and distract ourselves.
Do you think it's just because we humans, you can say humans or whatever, want to distract ourselves just because it might be partly because we're afraid of a positive change or even any type of change in our lives?
Change, yeah. We don't, change is scary. Change makes us think. We don't want to think. And when if we stop numbing, we invite a whole set of questions like, is this working? Do I want this? Do I like this? Have I outgrown this? Does this not, make sense for me anymore? What used to work doesn't work anymore. What we used to like, we don't like anymore. And when we follow that line of questions, it could shake up our entire world.
Yeah.
Right. Because we have it all figured out. So we're like, you know what? I'm not doing that anymore. And I talk about this in that first TEDx. I gave these examples of 3 clients that I had. Like, for example, there was one who, if you were to look at her, very successful, making an amazing salary, corner office. You'd look at her and you say, she's got it all, right? So She sees me because her energy is down. We do a couple things to get her energy back up. And all of a sudden she realizes, I hate my job. I've been climbing the corporate ladder for the last 25 years in a field I chose just to please my parents. Never got married because of this, never had a family because of this. I hate it. What do I do now? That's all she's ever known. So, right. So to take that on, it's like, that's too big. So what does she do? Dives right back into work. Sabotages her success.
Yeah.
And there was another one, a guy every week meet up with his buddies, they'd grab a beer and complain about their jobs and their wives and their lives, and then one day he gets into personal development and he's so excited about it. All these changes, he's really excited. And he brings it to his friends, one Friday night and thinking they'll be on board and they'll want to do all this stuff with him, go to these events and read these books, whatever. But they're looking at him like, he's weird and crazy. So what does he do? He's afraid of outgrowing his friends and his tribe. So he stops with all the personal development work. And then when he meets up with him, he drinks more than he drank before, sabotaging his success. So we do it for a reason.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, their tribe, just because it seems like just we're ingrained with these tribal traits, I guess you could say, and we don't want to leave our tribes. And once we find a tribe, no matter if you're you're pro side A or pro side B, you just want to scream it from the rooftops. And it seems like that's what causes other conflicts in one's life, just because you set in stone with those tribes.
Yeah, it's so true. And actually that's one of the classic things I see as someone moves from stage 3 to stage 4 is, that's where friends will shift because we're waking up. And if you want me to go through the stages. Sure. So stage 1 is like a setup stage. And I saw this with every study participant, me too. If you can imagine 4 legs of a table, the 4 legs being physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, what I saw with everybody was this real heavy lean on the physical and the mental, thinking and doing, not really prioritizing the emotional and the spiritual, feeling and being, right? Mm-hmm. So imagine the table with only 2 legs. It's easy for that table to topple over. That's us. Stage 2, by far the scariest of all of the stages. And this is shock. D-Day, Discovery Day, trauma. And this is the breakdown of the body, the mind, and the worldview. You've ignited the stress response right here. Now you're headed for every single stress-related symptom, illness, condition, disease. Your mind is in a complete state of chaos and overwhelm. You can't wrap your mind around what you just learned. It makes no sense. And your worldview is shattered. Your worldview is your mental model, the rules that prevent chaos and govern you. Don't go there. That person's safe. This is how life works, And in a moment, every rule has been shattered. Bottom has bottomed out and a new bottom hasn't been formed yet. It's terrifying. But think about it. If the bottom were to bottom out on you, what would you do? You'd grab hold of anything you could to stay safe and stay alive. That's stage 3. Survival instincts emerge. It's the most practical out of all of the stages. If you can't help me, get out of my way. How do I survive this experience? Where do I go? Who can I trust? How do I feed my kids? Right? Here's the trap though. Once you've figured out how to survive your experience, because it feels so much better than the shock and trauma of where you just came from, you think it's good. We have no idea there's a stage 4 and stage 5. So we kind of feel like, okay, I better plant some roots here and figure out how to do this. So we start planting roots here. We're not supposed to, but we don't know that. And 4 things happen. The first thing is we get all these small self benefits. We get to be right. We get our story. We get someone to blame. We get a target for our anger. We get sympathy from everybody we tell our story to, right? And on some level, that feeds us. That feels good. So we plant deeper roots here. And then the next thing happens. Now, because you're here longer than you should be, the mind starts doing things like, maybe you deserved it. Maybe you're not all that great. Maybe this, maybe that. So you plant deeper roots because this is how you're thinking. And this is what you feel. Like energy attracts like energy. So now you're calling situations and circumstances and relationships and people towards you to confirm, yeah, this is exactly where you belong. The misery loves company crowd, they come around now too. It gets worse, but I'll get you out of here. Because it feels so bad, but you don't know there's anything better. Right here's where you resign yourself. You're like, this stinks, but I better figure out a way to get used to this. So right here is where you start using food, drugs, alcohol, all that stuff. And you do that for a day, a week, a month. Now it's a habit, a year, 10 years, 20 years. And I can say to somebody 20 years out, that drinking you're doing or that emotional eating you're doing or that numbing in front of the TV, you think that has anything to do with your betrayal? And they look at me like I'm crazy. Say it happened 20 years ago. Do you see? All they did was put themselves in stage 3 and stay there.
Yeah, for sure.
And people do that for life.
Well, I want to kind of touch on something you said that, I've never really went through in my opinion, a big betrayal experience, I guess you could say. But, there's been small ones that I could probably think of, but nothing like that. Yeah. I feel like it was a major impact on my life. But even though that you've had a family or member betray you or whatever, you start guessing your own judgment about yourself. Like, wait, my judgment's completely off. That's kind of what you were just saying, that, maybe I don't know, what a good person is versus a bad person and stuff. And, and that would have played with my mind.
Yeah. Oh, trust is completely shattered. And in trust again, I teach a 4-step trust rebuilding process because that's what happens. And if you can't trust again, you're living half a life. You really are, because you can only get to a certain level of intimacy, of closeness, of friendship, of anything if you don't trust. And what's even worse is when you don't trust yourself, you never trust your judgment. You don't trust anything. And then what happens with betrayal is you certainly don't trust your betrayer. You don't trust yourself. So you're like, if I can't trust the person I trusted the most, and I don't even trust myself, how in the world am I going to trust anybody else? So it shatters trust all across the board. So I can finish the stages and then and start talking about trust. Would that help?
Sure. Let's do it. Yeah.
Right. So let's say you're willing to let go of those small self benefits and everything you get with it, grieve, mourn the loss, a bunch of things you need to do. You move to stage 4. Stage 4 is finding and adjusting to a new normal. So here's where you acknowledge, I can't undo my betrayal, but I can control what I do with it. And I always use the example of, if you've ever moved to a new house, office, condo, apartment, whatever, your stuff's not all there yet. It's not quite cozy, but it's going to be okay. And when you're in this kind of mental place, you start turning down the stress response. You're not healing just yet, but at least you stop the massive damage you were causing in stage 2 and stage 3. What's also interesting is if you were to move, you don't take everything with you. You don't take the things that don't represent who you want to be in that new space. And remember, we touched on this before. If your friends weren't there for you, you don't take them with you. So here's where you've outgrown them. If they don't rise with you, they don't come. So here's where people say to me all the time, but Dak, I've had these friends 10, 20, 30 years. Is it me? Yes, it is. You're undergoing a transformation. And if they don't keep up, they don't come. Like, with that example of the guy, my client who was doing all this personal development, and then his friends thought he was crazy. Now, 2 things could have happened. He caved and stopped with all the personal development work, so he didn't outgrow them. But if he was committed to it, and then he would have started meeting his like-minded friends and being so into that world. If his friends wouldn't rise, good chance right there he would have outgrown them. See how that works?
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, when you're in this stage 4, you're making it cozy, you're making it home, you move into the 5th most beautiful stage. And this is healing, rebirth, and a new worldview. So your body starts to heal. Self-love, self-care, eating well, exercise. You didn't have the bandwidth for that earlier. Now you do. Your mind is healing. You're making new rules, new boundaries based on everything you see so clearly now. And you have a new worldview based on the road you just traveled. And the 4 legs of the table, in the beginning, it was all about the physical and the mental. By this point, we're solidly grounded because we're focused on the emotional and the spiritual too. Those are the 5 stages.
Do you ever meet or work with anybody who can't get to that 5th stage and start self-healing? That they just keep allowing toxic people into their life and just keep going down this road of hurt, I guess you could say, or betrayal?
In the, within the PBT, Post Betrayal Transformation Institute, we have 2 types of people. We have people who come in where, they've recently been betrayed, or there's also the type where they are stuck in stage 3 for a really long time. It's not a question of they can't. I found the only driver, the biggest driver, I should say, the only biggest driver in your healing is your willingness. That's really it. But what I did find, there were 3 groups in the study who did not heal. And so it's important to know who those are, because this will stop anybody from their healing. The first was the group who refused to accept their betrayal. Like, they were stuck in stage 3. That was it. Yeah. That was their story. They were sticking with it. They didn't heal. That sounds like your parents. The second group, this was the group that was numbing, avoiding, distracting. So maybe they ran to the doctor who put them on mood stabilizers or anti-anxiety medication, or maybe they started drinking, emotionally eating, whatever. It may have made the day a bit easier to get through, not without a price. They didn't heal. The third group, this was the group where the betrayer had very little consequences. So whether it was out of fear of change, fear of the unknown, financial fear, not wanting to break up a family, religious reasons, that was a big one. They just did whatever they could just to turn the other cheek, try to put it behind them. I saw 2 things with this group. One was a further deterioration of the relationship. And the second thing was this group was the most physically sick. Your broken heart can't handle that. Mm. But I get it. People are afraid of that death and destruction of the old. But it's only with the death and destruction of the old do you birth the new.
Yeah, you're taking that new leap of faith and trying to learn to, like you just said, change again or trust again, I guess. But do people, All right. So that you finished stage 5. Is there anyone like, are you 100% healed, you think? Or is there that still small little, maybe 1%, like that stays in the back of your head that,
Yeah, you're a completely different person in stage 5. You've essentially created a new identity. You take all the parts you love, you leave behind whatever doesn't serve. And think about it. When you have healed from the person you trusted the most, the person who gave you, the people who gave you a sense of safety and security, when that's the person, those people, to shatter that very sense of safety and security, you can imagine how hard it is to rebuild from that. But when you do, you are a version of yourself, the strongest, most confident, healed version. I mean, that would blow your mind. But yeah, I mean, is there other stuff to be worked on? Of course. Yeah. But what I found, though, is when someone is in that stage 4, stage 5, and they are undergoing this transformation, that's when they're ready for that new relationship, that new career, that new body, that new level of health. They wouldn't have had access to it. They wouldn't have been ready earlier. That's why when people get out of a terrible relationship or they've been betrayed and they immediately go back, the only thing you can get is more of the same. Nothing's changed.
So you think if there's any more after stage 5, can you go back to a previous stage? Do you find yourself in a bad relationship again or something? You find yourself giving too much trust again? And
it's very unlikely on one level because you simply don't attract the same type of person. We see how an unhealed betrayal shows up in health, in work, in relationships, and in relationships, it shows up in one of 2 ways: a repeat betrayal. Like the face has changed, but it's the same thing. This is like the universe's way of saying there is a really big lesson here. It's not that it's your fault, it's that it's your opportunity to learn you are worthy, lovable, deserving. You need better boundaries in place, whatever it is. Until and unless you get that, you will keep getting opportunities in the form of people to teach you. So when you keep having these repeat betrayals, that's the frying pan to the head of like, you got to learn already something. There's something big here you need to learn, but we'll keep giving you people to teach you. But if not, all right. We also see it where, people put the big wall up. They're like, nope, been there, done that. No one's getting close to me again. They think it's coming from a place of strength. It's not. That's coming from fear. So it's very easy to spot an unhealed betrayal.
That makes sense to me. That just trying to think of my thoughts, how I want to word this, but it just seems like some people just still want to keep going down that same road, even if they think they are fully healed. But it's almost that they just don't see the light in front of them, but they just want to keep going back and just, like we just talked about earlier, just keep destroying themselves or self-destruction behaviors. But
that's what they know. And that's it. They're so hurt. Their heart's so broken. They feel so broken. They feel like a half. So then they figure, well, let me meet another half and that'll make me whole. That's never a good recipe. No. Because the only thing you do is, you get what you're lacking from that other person. No, the whole idea is to make yourself whole. And then from that place, you meet another whole person. Then now you're a power couple. It's a whole different thing.
So if and when a person is betrayed, do you find it or see it more coming from the people you worked with, an enemy, or more, maybe an enemy might be not the wrong word, but more people that are close to them rather than somebody that they barely know, I guess?
I mean, we're betrayed by all kinds of people, but the ones that hurt the most, the more we trust, the more we depend on someone, the deeper the betrayal. So for example, a child who's completely dependent on their parent, that's going to have a different impact than, let's say, your best friend sharing your secret, right? Still a betrayal, different level of cleanup.
Yeah. So you said you coined some of these terms. So you're like is there not a lot of studying going on with both behavioral?
Yeah, the whole thing with a PhD study is you're supposed to find the gap in the literature. You find what hasn't been studied yet. So betrayal was studied, but there was never a study, a deep lived experience of someone before, during, after, physically, mentally, and emotionally, their experience with betrayal. And I was glad I took it on. And first of all, it helped me heal. It made these 3 discoveries, and it changed like I said, my health, my family, my life. I mean, the PBT Institute is based on these discoveries because everything in there. Well, what happened was, like, when the 5 stages were discovered, You can't make discoveries and go back to business as usual, So I put the 5 stages in a program and it blew up. And then I was like, okay, how do I leverage me? So I created our certification program. So doctors, coaches, healers, therapists can know the 5 stages. And I didn't even get to the 3rd discovery, post-betrayal syndrome. We'll talk about that.
Okay.
And then I was like, okay, well, that's really good. And I'm like, but what would happen if we just took every single thing that works, what the study proved we need? We've had 40,000 people take our post-betrayal syndrome quiz. They say what they wanted. What if we just take everything that works and put it all under one roof in something that before now has never existed? And that's what the PBT Institute is.
So you said there's a certification for it.
Yeah. So we certify, we have 2 different tracks. We have coaches and healers can become a certified PBT, post-betrayal transformation coach, and doctors, therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, counselors can become a certified PBT practitioner. Because like, for example, just one stat, and I'm happy to share a bunch of them with you, 45% of all people who've been betrayed have a gut issue. And that could be anything from Crohn's, IBS, diverticulitis, constipation, diarrhea, you name it. So now think about it. Someone goes, they've been betrayed. Now they're having a gut issue. They go to an amazing gut doctor, but that gut doctor doesn't have a clue about the 5 stages and about what betrayal does to the gut. So you see, when all of these different types of practitioners are certified in the 5 stages, well, now they can really help their clients and patients.
So, all right. So those gut issues develop just because of what's going on in the brain and the mind, and your body is just adapting to what that toxic in there.
The issues are in the tissues every single time. And that's why when people, they think they have a betrayal, and let's say they go to a therapist. First of all, if that therapist isn't highly skilled in how to move someone through betrayal, it does more harm than good. We have a lot of people coming into the Institute with therapy trauma. But even so, even if the therapist is very highly skilled, that just gets it on the mental level. Yeah. That's not doing anything for the physical or the emotional. So the whole idea is it affects us on every level. So why do we think only one level needs to be addressed? Not for full healing.
That's a good question.
Yeah. And that's what we realized too. That was that other discovery that there's actually this collection of symptoms, physical, mental, and emotional, so common to betrayal. It's known as post-betrayal syndrome. And, what's so interesting is we have, like I said, 40,000 or so people take the post-betrayal syndrome quiz, men, women, every age, almost every country is represented. One thing about that is, we've all been taught time heals all wounds. Yeah. I have the proof when it comes to betrayal. That's not true. There's a question that says, is there anything else you'd like to share? People write things like, my betrayal happened 35 years ago and I'm unwilling to trust again. My betrayal happened 15 years ago and feels like yesterday. So we know betrayal is a very different experience.
Are people really open about their betrayals?
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Well, because, first of all, in our community, they're working one-on-one with our coaches. And it is such accelerated healing because all of our coaches do is, and practitioners, they're all certified in the 5 stages. So they know where someone is. And now that there's a roadmap, a proven roadmap, all they do is move them through it. And all of our coaches are certified in the 5 stages, but they're coming in with their own experience. We have one coach, 37 years as a therapist. We have coaches who specialize in addiction, narcissism, divorce, reconciliation, self-betrayal. I mean, you name it.
Yeah, a little bit of everything.
Just to get your job done. That's, and we bring in experts to teach master classes. So it's an amazing space.
So before you got your PhD, did you do a master's program? Was that along the?
I mean, my background is really strong in health, and it's, a personal trainer, holistic dietitian, nice. Master's in nutrition, functional diagnostic nutritionist, whole health coach, and now PhD in transpersonal psychology.
Has that always been part of your life? I mean, even growing up when you were younger, or just health and wellness and.
I graduated. When I graduated from college, it was actually a double major in TV production, broadcast journalism.
Okay.
But it just wasn't rewarding, and I knew I wanted to help people, but I had no idea how. So I started. I wanted to be in health. I knew that was the road I wanted to take, and so I remember registering for this sort of MSRD combo program, dietitian and masters, but I had to pay for it. So I was like, okay, what goes well with that. And I was like, fitness. All right, I'll be an aerobics instructor back in the day. And I was like, I'm way too uncoordinated to do that. I'm like, okay, I'll become a trainer. And that business blew up and carried me all through school.
Nice. So you just did personal training?
Way back in the day, in 91.
Oh, it ain't that long ago. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. So that's how it started. And that business just took off.
Well, that's good. That's great. Well, what were some of those stats you just mentioned, though, that with that paper you just held up as far as post-betrayal?
Sure.
Yeah. Let's get into those a little bit.
So this is based on, like I said, men, women, every age, every demographic. So, okay, 78% constantly revisit their experience. 81% feel a loss of personal power. 80% are hypervigilant. That's exhausting. 94% deal with painful triggers. These are the most common physical symptoms. 71% have low energy. 68% have sleep issues. 63% have extreme fatigue. Those are your adrenals, they tanked.
Yeah.
47% have weight changes. So in the beginning, maybe you can't hold food down. Later on, you're using food for comfort. And 45% have digestive issues. That's what I talked about earlier. The most common mental symptoms. 78% are overwhelmed. 70% walking around in a state of disbelief. 68% are unable to focus. 64% are in shock. 62% are unable to concentrate. So imagine you can't concentrate. You have a gut issue. You're exhausted and you have to work and you have to raise your kids.
Mm-hmm.
That's not even the emotional ones. Emotionally, 88% have extreme sadness. 83% are really, really angry. I mean, you just bounce back and forth between sadness and anger, and that's exhausting. 82% feel hurt, 80% have anxiety, 79% are stressed. So here's why I wrote the book Trust Again. Ready? 84% have an inability to trust. 67% prevent themselves from forming deep relationships because they're afraid of being hurt again. 82% find it hard to move forward. 90% want to move forward, but they don't know how.
I feel like I belong in some of those percentages right there.
Yeah.
The trust ones. Right? Yeah.
That's what happens. And people, those are the people in stage 2 to stage 3, and many of them stay.
And they'll stay there forever.
Forever. Yeah. And then what they'll do is they'll start medicating the symptoms. They can't sleep. They'll take something to sleep. Their gut's off. They'll take something for the gut. They have anxiety. They'll start drinking or numbing or whatever. So all they're doing then is medicating. It's like symptom relief. Yeah. Never getting to the root of it. So they're, never healing. And then mentally and emotionally, when you feel that bad for that long, you're doing such a job on yourself mentally and emotionally too. So yeah, you firmly root yourself in stage 3. I mean, I'm telling you, that's why this just came out. It went number 1 in 8 categories. I was shocked.
Wow.
But it's hitting a nerve because it's just for stage 3.
So, I mean, is this growing? I mean, are more doctors and like medical doctors being aware of this, that it could just not be just, a physical. Yeah. So, I mean, I feel like it should be growing a little bit more that, hey, let's not look at, this one symptom, but let's take a deeper dive like you've been talking about. Yeah. But is it just not?
Only because of a lack of awareness. I mean, even a couple of years ago, it was just 2018, because these discoveries were only made a couple of years ago. I actually spoke at it's a very well-respected health and wellness conference, and they have this, it's this series of talks called The Future of Health, and 100 people submitted to speak. 15 are chosen. It was an honor to be chosen to be one of the, the people chosen to speak. And it was all these doctors, and it was terrifying backstage, but it was the first time I was going to be sharing about these discoveries and everything. And it turns out I won. Like it came in number 1 because it was such a breakthrough in the area of trauma for that time.
Yeah, I would definitely say so. I mean, just because I've never really sat down and talked with any or knew this subject. And that's why I'm glad I wanted you to come on, because I thought it'd be very interesting for me. And that, it might be just a deeper thing rather than just if I'm eating something or, whatever. So, and that's what most people I would talk to, especially in probably my area of where I live at, yeah, that's the first things they would say. Oh, go check what's your stress like. Go check your diet, whatever. So
that's it, which is important. And we actually use health because I have a strong health background. We use health strategically. It's more like, let's get rid of the brain fog so you could think a little bit clearer. And then also because confidence is so shattered and mentally, a lot of them, they're in so much pain. So I may break someone's 30, 40 year sugar addiction. And I'm like, they're like, how did I do that? I'm like, okay, well, if you could do that, you think you could change some of this, thinking you're doing. So we use it strategically. Health has a huge component. It's also, it's one of the few things when life is completely chaotic. It's one of the few things we have control over. So for someone who feels like their life is completely upended, it's important to feel like, okay, you know what? At least I control what I eat and how I move. So it's really important, but I'm not necessarily using health for them to like look good in their skinny jeans. It's just coming from a different place. Yeah.
So, all right, let's say I had a sugar addiction and, I'm known to crush some gummy bears on the weekends here. But so for 30 or 40 years, sugar is obviously one of the biggest enemy in America with obesity. So how would you help, say generally, how would you help like someone like me if I had a problem, break my addiction of sugar?
Yeah. Well, so, that's not like where I'm leading, coming from. Like I would look at it like for you to have a sugar addiction, I'm never going to approach the food. For me, it's you're doing that for a reason. It's doing something. So I'm way more interested in what's driving the behavior. People do that.
Emotion eating sort of.
They feel like, okay, well, if I change the behavior, I'll have a different result, right? Which makes sense. But I'm looking at it like what goes before the behavior? It's the belief.
Gotcha.
So the belief is driving the behavior. So it's sort of a waste of time just to work on the behavior to get the different result because it was the belief that was driving it. So I'd rather get there.
I'm with you. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
I got you there. Well, how long did it take you to write your book?
This is my sixth one. So books don't, that's, for me, that's it just, if a book needs to be written, it just flows.
Does it come easy for you then?
The writing, not the marketing, but the writing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I did my master's degree, and one of the reasons I never went for my PhD was just because I didn't want to write a dissertation, and I just thought it would be one of the most horrible experiences in my life. And looking back on it, I kind of wish I would have done it just to have that now. It's probably a small regret, but
yeah. Well, keep in mind, mine was, I never thought I'd ever go back for it. It was brutal, but this was all something I was obviously meant to do. And I just remember going through it just going through the program saying, if I can heal, I'm just taking everybody with me. So clearly I was meant to do this for, just for a big reason. Because, you're right, though, that dissertation piece was grueling.
Yeah.
But then again, and that's why I wrote Trust Again, because when I saw, I must have spent 500 plus hours on the dissertation and 250 studies. And I'm like, and 3 people are reading it. Like that math just doesn't make sense. So I'm like, no, I'm going to make this reader friendly and get this message out to the world.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad you're doing it. I feel like more people would need to hear about this, but do you ever hear any, I guess, I don't want to say, I guess naysayers would say, nah, that's not true. Just if you betray, just get over it and move on with your life. You don't really need all this stuff. What do you say to?
They can. Listen, and not only did I live it, I'm the one who did the study on it. So, I have the proof. But if they'd rather have their story, they're entitled to it. And that's it. People would rather have their story because if they do, they don't have to look at themselves. They don't have to change. They can keep things as is. So, where they are right now in their life, that's where they're coming from. And I don't look at that as it's my job to change them. It's okay.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Do you ever meditate or provide meditation services for? Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely that's where the downloads happen. So if you're so stressed and filled with anxiety and everything, like you can't get those downloads. Whenever I'm writing a book, it's kind of coming through me, So try to keep things as clear and clean as I can.
Nice. You don't deal with any writer's block or anything, or?
Sometimes, but if the message has to come out, that it always finds a way.
Huh. Yeah.
And I don't write them just because it's like time to write another book. Like I wrote From Hardened to Healed because I found, and Trust Again just came out last year, but I just found that so many people were just getting stuck in stage 3. So I just realized there was a need for it. And I just tell some really powerful stories in there and just show people what staying stuck is doing to them and what they could have if they're willing to let go of their stories for something that just serves them so much better.
It's what, I teach maybe a couple CrossFit classes a week, and that some people have certain fitness goals of it or whatever, but a lot of people they say they want to achieve that goal, but it's like, do you really want to achieve that goal? It's like they don't want to do anything about it as far as taking that first step into going to a positive change. So,
transformation begins when you tell yourself the truth. And most people would rather just say something, but the follow-up requires a very different way to think and act and behave. And that's what people don't want to do.
Yeah. Well, the truth hurts to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And that's when they want to rather just ball up and go into a corner and just continue like their ways, like kind of what we were talking about earlier. So.
Yeah. And they can, but the people who are ready for, transformation, and it's interesting because people coming into the PBT Institute, I used to say, it's if you've been betrayed by a family member, partner, friend, coworker, self. And then I realized, it's not. It's for people ready to heal from the betrayal of, a family member, partner, friend. Because the truth is, if you're not ready, if you're getting too much out of staying stuck, you're not going anywhere. So the PBT Institute is not the place for you.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like, based on what I've heard is like people who have, alcohol addiction and stuff, once you finally hit rock bottom, it's like, okay, like I'm ready to take my first step. And
it's like how AA is to alcohol, the PBT Institute is to betrayal.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Exactly.
Gotcha. Well, Dr. Debi, you've been generous with your time, and I don't want to hold you up anymore. And I really appreciate you coming on here and talking with me. But so if you want to give this out, you can. But if people want to find your books, find your social medias, your own stuff, I mean, how would they do that?
Yeah, I would say take the healedorhardenedquiz.com. I mean, see what stage you're in, and you'll see what force of nature you are. Just healedorhardenedquiz.com.
Okay. And if they want to, is your books on Amazon and all that good stuff? Or?
On Amazon. I mean, you can also, if you want, so the newest book is From Hardened to Healed. So you can get it from Amazon, From Hardened to Healed. And then if you go to the PBT is in Post-Betrayal Transformation, thepbtinstitute.com/From Hardened to Healed. You put in your receipt, you get all kinds of bonuses once you purchase the book. Yeah.
Great. That's great. Well, again, thank you again. I really have enjoyed that conversation. I feel like I learned a few good things and I can take with me and hopefully share with some other people. So
great. Thanks so much.
You're very welcome. Man. All right. And we'll call that a night. All right. Good news and good night, everybody.